This message comes from Whole Foods Market. From big game bites to sideline sips, get everything you need for a watch party victory. Find yellow sale signs all over the store. Instant touchdown. Fuel your game day with big flavors from Whole Foods Market.
Hey everyone, you're listening to Code Switch, the show about race and identity from NPR. I'm B.A. Parker. A lot is going on in the world right now, but I can't get my mind off of Minnesota. I mean, things have already been extremely tense in Minneapolis for weeks after interactions between ICE and protesters came to a head when an ICE officer shot and killed Renee Macklin-Good at the beginning of January. From there, protests and tensions swelled. And then on Saturday, a little after 9 in the morning, an immigration officer shot and killed a man named Alex Preddy. Preddy was 37 years old. He was an ICU nurse participating in protests against ICE. Over the weekend, Trump administration officials, including Kristi Noem and Gregory Bavino, repeatedly tried to characterize Preddy as a domestic terrorist. Video evidence reviewed and eyewitness accounts that have surfaced have refuted assertions that Preddy was brandishing his handgun at any time during the encounter. Here's NPR immigration reporter Jasmine Garsd.
There is no evidence in the videos, which, by the way, NPR has verified, that Preddy was ever brandishing a gun in his hand. What we do see is Preddy holding a phone in his hand, and then at least 6 masked federal officers tackling him, beating him, spraying him in the face with a chemical agent. Then they pin him down on the ground. Then one agent appears to pull a gun from Preddy's waistband before agents shoot him. We counted 10 rounds fired.
Watching all this unfold, I've been thinking about what it means to be a protester these days. I mean, you've got thousands of people coming out in Minneapolis in sub-zero degree weather, fighting against what they see as the inappropriate actions and policies of ICE and DHS. But it's at best unclear as to whether any of this will have a long-term effect on how this country polices immigration. And meanwhile, people are out there in the freezing cold getting pulled over, detained, pepper sprayed, tear gassed, and in 2 cases, killed by masked government officials. And I don't think it's any coincidence that all of this is going down in Minneapolis. I mean, we have to remember that Minneapolis is where George Floyd was murdered in 2020. And the protests there were enormous. I mean, Minneapolis essentially launched the racial reckoning that overtook the entire country that year. And people in Minnesota have spent years organizing, strategizing, and honing their tactics to protest perceived injustices. So if any city in the country is prepared to take on the fight right now, it's arguably Minneapolis. And it's got me thinking about an episode we did back in July of last year. It was about how protests work, what they do and don't do, and why they matter. One of the people we spoke to was Gloria Browne-Marshall. She's an historian, and she wrote a book about protests. And she said one of the things that a lot of people do, and I admit I can be guilty of this, is they think protests should work almost instantly, like in TV.
Because in the TV version, you have the problem, then you have the protest, you have the dark night of the soul where the protest doesn't work, then the next night it does, and now people are happy, and that's the end of the show. And so they don't show that the other side is saying, we're going to take this ground back you just took from us. The ground you took is mine.
We've talked about this on Code Switch before. For every movement that pushes for its version of justice, there's another movement pushing back hard against that. Saying, no, we don't want those changes. We want things to stay the same. Or actually, we want things to go back to an even earlier era. So the cycle of protest and backlash can really swing. Which is why I think that today, in the midst of this very scary and deadly clash that's happening in Minnesota and around the country, it's worth revisiting our conversation about what protesting actually means.
Support for this podcast and the following message come from Indeed. Hiring isn't just about finding someone willing to take the job. You need a person with the right background who can move your business forward. Spend more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Receive a $75 sponsored job credit with Indeed Sponsored Jobs at Indeed.com/codeswitch. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Do it the right way with Indeed. This message comes from Schwab. At Schwab, how you invest is your choice, not theirs. That's why when it comes to managing your wealth, Schwab gives you more choices. You can invest and trade on your own. Plus, get advice and more comprehensive wealth solutions to help meet your unique needs. With award-winning service, low costs, and transparent advice, you can manage your wealth your way at Schwab. Visit schwab.com to learn more.
This message comes from Whole Foods Market. From big game bites to sideline sips, get everything you need for a watch party victory at Whole Foods Market. Find yellow sale signs all over the store, from the chip aisle with salty snacks from Kettle and Late July, down to the meat department where there are no antibiotics ever fresh sausages are made in-house. And gear up with effortless, ready-to-heat wings and fresh guacamole from the prepared foods department. Instant touchdown. Fuel your game day with big flavors from Whole Foods Market.
I spoke with Professor Gloria J. Browne-Marshall. She's a professor of constitutional law and Africana studies at John Jay College, and her book, A Protest History of the United States, explores how people in the U.S. have always organized, from indigenous revolts to union strikes to the 2020 protests after the killing of George Floyd. Rebellion and protest have shaped this country.
We need to know how to do this, and do this meaning protest. And people have said, oh, it's not effective anymore. Nobody does anything with protests. It doesn't really work. And so I wanted to have examples, and I couldn't put everybody's protests in there, but it's got a lot of protests from, the indigenous uprisings and all these different things that people have done, large and small, that I think is necessary for us to understand today to inform our protests today.
Gloria told me that she wanted to write the book because she was seeing a disconnect between the rights we have now and the knowledge we have of the people who fought to achieve those rights.
And they were almost dismissed from history. And I felt that they should be, or at least their efforts and their work should be known. And also I wanted young people to understand that there are protests that have taken place that can inform the protests they're doing today.
This is a perfect segue because I was talking to a listener who lives in Austin, Texas, a mom, and she's trying to persuade her teenage son that protests work.
My name is Katie Hamill. My husband and I went to the No Kings protest here, and I had been talking to my son about the protest a couple days prior, seeing if he wanted to come down with, let's go out, let's hold some signs. And his response was almost immediately, what's the purpose? I don't think protests really do anything. They don't seem to make any difference.
What would you say to this mom to try to, cajole this kid back into action?
Well, depending on the age, they've seen a lot. And they've seen a lot of protests, and yet they see a lot of backsliding. And so they have the right to be cynical. So I think she should really see him as someone who's deservedly cynical based on everything they've seen in their short time period on the planet, but also to realize that protest, even if it's street protest or some other protest, is empowering. And it allows them to lift that weight off of their shoulders and be a part of something that's social, that sense of empowerment that comes with being a part of something greater than yourself.
What would you consider the most successful movements in U.S. history?
8-hour workday. Yes, that's why people, don't think that came from protest.
Is 8-hour workday a good thing?
An 8-hour workday is a good thing because people used to work 16 to 20 hours. They used to work whatever amount of time the employer wanted them to work. And see, that's why I was saying basic things like that we take for granted, and we don't realize that the 8-hour workday was in law in the 1860s. But in practice, it didn't take place till the 1900s. People had to protest to make it a reality. You had people in the street. You had strikes. You had work shortages or slowdowns. You had work stoppages. And my book is about there are many ways in which to protest. We don't think of Rosa Parks with a bullhorn in the street with a sign, but her protest was internationally known and effective all the same. So for that mother talking to that young person, just think protest doesn't have to be just out in the street. It could be a singular decision not to buy at a certain store. That's protest. So I look at it, somebody wants to take a knee. That's protest. That's an individual part or could be part of a group. And if we expand the idea of protest, it can involve more people and do more things. You don't have to go out into the street. That's not the way it has to be.
Is that what you think people are getting wrong about protest?
I think people are getting wrong about protests. One, they get a lot of things wrong, not thinking there's a strategy to it. Mm-hmm. And you think that you do the TV version of protests because people look at the last protest and they see the change. They think the last protest did it. They don't think of all the years of protest leading up to it. Mm-hmm. Because in the TV version, you have the problem, then you have the protest, you have the dark night of the soul where the protest doesn't work, then the next night it does, and now people are happy, and that's the end of the show. And so they don't show that the other side is saying, we're going to take this ground back you just took from us. The ground you took is mine.
I think it would be interesting to just go through the strategy of a single protest, the non-TV version of it.
Okay. The coal workers' strike was based on the fact that the corporations, the train barons, and the coal company barons, and they used the word barons back then because they were basically taking from the European models. Mm-hmm. They would come here and with the same mindset, many of them, of serfdom, that the worker is a serf. And at the time in Europe, the serf was connected to the land. That's why you get that word landlord. Because, yes, they were lord of the land. It became the version in the South of sharecropping, where the farmer would get, a little part of what they produced, and the lion's share of it would go to the plantation owner. And so what we have now are people who are working in the coal mines. They find this massive amount of coal in the mountains of West Virginia. And so there's no 8-hour work day. They work them as long as they need to work them. They're going into these dangerous conditions, and people are dying. People are losing a limb. But the corporation owns the land. They own the homes. They own the schools. They own the church. The corporations own the stores. And so the people who are working there are paid in what there's called scripts. They're a piece of paper. It's not real money. It's a piece of paper with the company's name on it. Say it's $10. And then you go to the company store. And then the company store, which is owned by the corporation, then, writes down how much you bought at the company store and takes it off of the script and writes it down how much you now owe. From the rent, from the store, from clothes, the worker had nothing. So the workers want to join unions. They want to become united and have a power to sit at the table and decide certain things. So they wanted to renegotiate their wages. And to do that individually, they would have, they call yellow dog contracts. And in the contract, it said you could not, negotiate your wage. You could not be part of a union. And if you did, you would be evicted from your home. And so what they had to do, they had someone named Mother Jones. And Mother Jones was this little, she's like a little grandmother, this little white-haired white woman who would with this fierce voice. And she would tell them, get together, everybody come together. So you had this strategy of how much money we should make. What should be the union? How can we bring in somebody from outside to help organize us? Then you have this union organizer in Mother Jones. So you have all these things coming together, but you also had people who were not going to allow that to happen. So folks were evicted. And once they were evicted, they would live in a tent. But then the corporation owned the land where the tents were, so they are evicted from the tents. So you had, that's why you had a high price paid in order for them to continue to have union organizers. But because unions were in other parts of the country, outside people came in to help them organize their unions. So you had pressure from the outside. You had lobbying of federal government to recognize the unions and recognize the ability to have a union. You think about that, and you can apply that to what happened in the civil rights movement. Because a lot of the civil rights movement was based on the structure of what happened with labor organizing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I wanted to ask you, so at the beginning of July, I saw these aerial views of Philadelphia. Their sanitation workers were on strike, and the streets were full of trash, and it was massive and like everywhere. What did you think about that?
I used to live in Philadelphia, and I lived in Philadelphia during a trash strike.
How'd it go?
Rats were everywhere.
Right.
They were jumping out of baskets. On my way home, you had to dodge things. Yes, it was bad. And once again, what is it doing? Disrupting. Yeah. It's making you stop your day-to-day going and back and forth to whatever you're doing to say, pay attention to this issue over here. And so now you have this standoff. How long are people going to go without wages? Part of what I say in my book is my father was part of a protest. And when he protested, they were out so long, we lost our house. Yes, we lost our house. He got another job in the end and worked his way up, and, he's passed on now. But, he ended up getting back on his feet and all of that. But yes, you can have devastating economic effects. I'm not trying to gloss this over at all. Yeah. People can get arrested. The police can be, accused of assault. In many instances, those people who are out protesting will have economic effects. That is part of it too.
But when you see firsthand what the cost of protest looks like, what do you take from that when you see something like that happen with your dad?
I think about the courage. These people put their lives and livelihoods on the line. They wanted something that was beyond just their individual needs. And so whether or not they're fighting for clean water or for better schools or for higher wages, they're going to be fighting for something that will not entail 100% of people. Because protests are usually just a fraction of the people involved, yet the whole group gets the benefit. Sometimes I ask the people, you do want to be a freedom freeloader? Because we have a lot of freedom freeloaders who don't want to do anything except reap the benefits of other people putting themselves on the line. But it's always been that way.
Golly.
So that's why a lot of people go, well, why isn't everybody there? It's never been everyone there, if that's proper English. Mm-hmm. It's always just been a fraction of people who have made the difference when it comes to protesting.
So what happens when you fight the good fight and it doesn't go your way?
How could we lose? Yeah. This was something very important. This was necessary. Didn't they understand? This was to help our education.
That's coming up. Stay with us.
This message comes from Mint Mobile. Starting at $15 a month, make the switch at mintmobile.com/switch. $45 upfront payment for 3 months. 5 gigabyte plan equivalent to $15 a month. Taxes and fees extra. First 3 months only. See terms.
This message comes from Amazon One Medical and Amazon Pharmacy. Having a health issue that requires medication can be stressful. Are the meds going to get refilled on time? Do I need to renew my prescription? Do I need an appointment to get them renewed? Amazon One Medical has 24/7 virtual care, and Amazon Pharmacy delivers meds to you fast, anxiety-free. With Amazon, healthcare just got less painful. This message comes from Mint Mobile. This holiday season, stop overpaying for wireless and switch to Mint. Shop 50% off unlimited plans at mintmobile.com/switch. Limited time offer. Upfront payment of $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12 months. Taxes and fees extra. Initial plan term only. Above 35 gigabytes, network may slow when busy. Capable device required. Availability, speed, and coverage varies. See mintmobile.com.
This message comes from the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, recognizing extraordinarily creative individuals whose ideas, solutions, and discoveries expand people's expectations of what's possible. macfound.org.
Parker, just Parker. Code switch. And we're back with a conversation from July 2025 that we've been thinking about given everything happening in Minnesota right now. I've been talking to Professor Gloria J. Browne-Marshall about her book, A Protest History of the United States. And she told me that one thing that stood out to her in her research was the importance of young people in protests.
So many high school students have played major roles in protests. They haven't recently because so many people refuse to give young people their due as far as effective protesters. They became effective during George Floyd because older people like myself who had respiratory issues or whatever couldn't protest as much as we would have. And so that gave the entree for young people to take their true role. But protests are usually by the young. They have the time to read the issues, but they also have the type of jobs that would allow them to protest. And the children's marches, for example, during the Civil Rights Movement, Martin Luther King had children, high school students, because if the parents marched and they lost their job, the whole family would lose their income. Mm-hmm. And so they would have high school students participating or college students participating in sit-ins and marches.
That's why they protesting at night. They got to get out of school. You got things to do. Do you remember, you write about it in the book, but I wanted you to say, do you remember your first protest?
I remember my first protest. I was in grade school, and this was during the time period in which a lot of white parents were taking their kids out of school and moving to the suburbs. I didn't understand any of this. All I knew was they wanted to pass what they called a levy, a tax levy. I wasn't even sure what a tax levy was. All I knew was that we needed the tax money to sustain the school. I didn't know as a child that, working people dislike taxes. I had no clue. But we went to the streets and we had our little sign, vote for the levy. And I had a little sign, vote for the levy to save our school. Vote for the levy. We're depending on you. And so, now you know I didn't go in to sing it. And so I wrote the little song and we were there. We were marching the street with our signs and everything like that. And the levy did not pass. We did not have the taxes to sustain the school system with all of the people who had the higher incomes leaving, the school district after Brown versus Board of Education. This wasn't right after Brown. Thank you very much for anybody trying to add stuff up. So
this was post-1950.
Thank you. This was not in the 50s at all. Thank you very much for folks going on Google already. But but what really got me about losing was just what you said, that feeling. Mm-hmm. How could we lose?
Yeah.
This was something very important. This was necessary. Didn't they understand? This was to help our education. This was a good thing. So that was my first time going all in on a protest as a little kid, not understanding, not being mature enough to realize all the different levels of what was going on at the time. And that's why I said a lot of the young people were the ones who had the opportunity to study these things, the high school students, the college students, to study the issues, the different layers of the issues, and not just go out emotionally and protest, but think of the strategies based on what they were actually protesting against. Some of the anti-war protests, very successful protests, because those college students studied the Vietnam War. They understood what they were protesting against. They knew what the votes were. They knew how the money was being spent. They knew what the body counts were. So they would use that in their protest, in trying to change the hearts and minds of people in positions of power and the presidency. I mean, Lyndon Johnson did not run for a second term because of the Vietnam War and the protests against the war. And high school students, U.S. Supreme Court case, the Tinker's case, is high school students protesting silently. They wore an armband to school as a protest of the Vietnam War.
Mm-hmm.
So there are so many ways in which people have protested. But I think it's important for us to understand the issues that we're battling against and what it's going to take that would allow us to have substantive change.
Mm-hmm.
So that when you have the 2 steps forward, when you have that 1 step back, the 1 step back is not so deep that it's devastating.
Golly, I'm thinking about when reading that in your book, when I was a kid and my first protest didn't go well, that would have devastated me and dissuaded me. But then I remembered my first protest as a teenager, long before I was a journalist. Please note that. It didn't go well. It didn't work in the way that I wanted it to. And as you were saying that, like, oh, I wasn't dissuaded as a young person from protesting.
I think it's very important to know that protesting does give a sense of power. We've been thwarted and our rights undermined for most of the time in this country.
Hmm.
So to say, I'm so disheartened by this past election that I can't do anything else is to negate all the history and all of our ancestral work that fought in the face of crooked elections, fought in the face of denial of the right to vote, lynchings based on the right to vote. Look at the nation's history.
It feels like this country has been in this perpetual state of protest since maybe 2020, maybe earlier 2017. Does what we're looking at right now seem to be working, or have you seen it shift?
I've seen a shift because I haven't seen the use of strategy the way it was used previously. And there's an impatience. This is the 21st century. People don't want to re-protest what was already protested and won. So consider the Montgomery bus boycott was in 1955.
Mm.
We gained the civil rights legislation in 1964 and the Voting Rights Act in 1965.
Right.
And so many lives were lost, so many people were assaulted, so many protests happened during that time period of 1955 to 1965. But people want the TV version, and they want to see the march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in
Summer
in
protests
March.
happened and it was all done.
And
Everything
it was all
fixed.
done. It was
I saw that
1965. Yeah, you saw the movie Selma?
We heard them say we don't deserve to be here. But today, we stand as Americans.
It's like, and you even get a theme song.
One day, when the glory comes, it will be ours. It will be ours. Oh, one day.
So I think that there's much more to it because we're in a nation that began with this kind of, dual personality of stating we want liberty while on stolen indigenous land and kidnapped African people.
Hmm.
So there's always been this conflict between what's been stated as liberty and freedom and what's actually been given. So perpetual protest, I would agree with that. The Enemy Aliens Act was something that was passed by federal legislation in the 1700s. So we had just gotten to be a country when they started to limit the protest rights of immigrants. So that's why I'm telling you, once you look at the history of it and you realize this is something that's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but it's 2 necessary steps. Necessary, or else you're always going backwards. That's why it's so important to understand that protest is a necessary part of our work. I think what's missing as well is it's not that the people before were naive. Yes, they wanted to just live their life. I think they believed in rest as well. Rest didn't just start in the 21st century. So they wanted to rest. But they decided to use their honest rage in ways that would be progressive for the community, for their families, and for the future. And I think that's something I want people to understand, that Folks before weren't just so giving of their time and money and energy. They didn't think about anything else. They wanted to be with their families. They wanted to enjoy their lives too. But they also knew there was something bigger than themselves that they needed to be a part of. And that's why we have the rights and protections we have today, because they protested. Those rights were on the paper, just like the 8-hour workday was on the paper in 1800s. But the protests made them a reality that we today can take for granted. Yeah. So I think we need to think about and look at the future. And are we going to be freedom freeloaders? Or are we going to invest in a future in which there are people who gain rights and protections based on our work the same way we gain them based on other people's work?
On that note, thank you, Professor.
Thank you, Parker.
And that's our show. You can follow us on Instagram at NPR Code Switch. If email is more your thing, ours is codeswitch@npr.org. And subscribe to the podcast on the NPR app or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also subscribe to the Code Switch newsletter by going to npr.org/Code Switch newsletter. Just a reminder that signing up for Code Switch Plus is a great way to support our show and public media. And you'll get to listen to every episode sponsor-free. So please go find out more at plus.npr.org/Code Switch. This episode was produced by Xavier Lopez. It was edited by Leah Donnella. Our engineer was Jimmy Keeley. And a big shout out to the rest of the Code Switch massive: Christina Kala, Jess Kung, Courtney Stein, Dahlia Murtada, Verlin Williams, and Jean Demby. I'm B.A. Parker. Hydrate.
This message comes from MIDI Health. Co-founders Dr. Kathleen Jordan and CEO Joanna Strober discuss why they started a virtual care platform for women in perimenopause and menopause.
The symptoms and experiences that women have in midlife, I think, were underappreciated or possibly even trivialized. The changes of perimenopause and menopause create a broad spectrum of symptoms and can actually lead to long-term health issues, but too few clinicians are trained in it.
I also want to add, often the type of care that women are needing is very iterative. It requires trying different medications, learning about their body, and learning how to take care of themselves. And so what we've tried to do at MIDI Health is create a new type of care system that is responsive to women's needs and helps them take care of themselves and stay healthy instead of just treating disease.
MIDI Health, committed to helping women in midlife with perimenopause and menopause care, accessible via telehealth visits. At joinmidi.com.
This message comes from Kachava. It feels good to connect to your simpler side. Simplifying your wellness with Kachava's all-in-one nutrition shake feels good too. With 25 grams of protein, 6 grams of fiber, greens, and more, no fillers, just the highest quality ingredients. Simplify your nutrition at Kachava.com and use code NPR. New customers get $20 off an order of 2 bags or more now through January 31st. That's KACHAVA.com, code NPR.